So welcome to another episode of the Elite Agent Masterclass. Today, myself and Jack Durkin, co-founders of the Elite Agent Masterclass, have the great pleasure of hosting Michael Bailey. Now, Michael took a change in direction back in 2012. London born and raised, moved up to Manchester. Be interested to delve deeper into why. He is an award-winning agent, represents the top 5% of agents in the UK, went self-employed in October 2019, just before the pandemic. It'd be interesting to hear more about that. Is a dad to 3 young children, and also did an incredible campaign back in July, which we'll delve more into with Michael as the pod unravels. Michael, welcome to the Elite Agent Masterclass. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, good to see you both, and thanks for the invite.
No, thanks for joining us. So, just for context for the audience, Michael and I have been connected through Facebook and LinkedIn for quite some time, but this is the first time we've actually spoken directly. And this is the first time, Jack, you've met Michael. So this is completely neutral, and we've spoken briefly before we jumped on, but we wanted to keep this as unstructured as possible to get really underneath the surface with you, Michael. So, Jack, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. It's interesting because me and Michael have only been connected for quite a short time. But now that we've been connected, it's really difficult to stay away from your content because there's just so much of it. So I'm surprised we haven't been connected sooner. I suppose the first question I had is really to go right back to the start. Where did it all begin? Where did your passion for estate agency start? And yeah, what brought you into estate agency?
So I'm probably one of the breed of people that there's not many of, I don't think necessarily, and as much it was something I was quite interested in and wanted to do. And there was where I grew up in North London, where we used to get the bus to school, there was an agency on the outside of the station there, and they always seemed to be looking to recruit. And I was always I'd love a go at that, etc., etc., etc. And time went on, and then I went to university, and I wasn't able to drive for medical reasons at that point. And then I met someone who ran an agency and said, "Well, you're graduating in December. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I haven't got any plans at all." And so from there, I got given an opportunity with a few conditions, like get my driving license in 4 months and all this kind of stuff. And that was it. We were off.
And you've not looked back since?
No, not looked back since. And again, that was that was on the outer reaches of North London, kind of borders of Hertfordshire.
And so when you became an agent, that was from my research back in 2006, is that right?
Yeah, so I started having the conversations with the agency owner in 2006, and then eventually started in that January 2007. But yeah, essentially, yeah, we were recruited in 2006.
And what was it? What was it back then? You say you're one of these rare breed of people that had a bit of an interest in property. What was it that grabbed you?
I wanted to get into development. And I thought, well, in terms of getting in and learning skills and finding, the right people to connect with in terms of being around the table with the right people to elevate yourself kind of thing. That's where we started. And the owner of the agency at that time did do a bit of development on the side. So it all kind of came to a crunch there. And I just generally like property, even as a sort of teenager and in my early 20s was watching all the property programs and all that stuff. So yeah, just really, really interested in property generally, and who wouldn't want to go and nosy around some really beautiful houses.
It's a really fair comment, right? It's one of the incredible perks of our job.
Yeah, very much so.
A lot of people, I think, say that they kind of fell into estate agency, which was obviously different for you. Quite similar for me as well. I kind of knew that I wanted to go into the property world. But I suppose it's coming up to, 20 years, 18 years, 20 years since you've been in the property industry. What have you seen change over that time?
Probably not enough. Certainly how agencies approach business, I think. And obviously the development of the self-employed sector and how people are holding themselves to account more. But I think one of my favorite changes that I've noticed is this kind of community of really open-minded agents that all want to kind of be better, but also help each other. So there's numerous kind of WhatsApp groups and people I've met and, within my brokerage, but also outside of it. And that's something which really, really excites me because it definitely didn't used to be like that. Well, and to be fair, perhaps sometimes even now it isn't like that. There's, where we are here, it's still quite tribal, which it just blows my mind really, because if we all work together, it would be more to the sellers. and the buyer's credit. But yeah, it's definitely got better in that respect. That's one of my favourite changes between where we are now and where I started.
Love that. I think the big thing you've sort of shared there, and this is kind of one of the reasons why Jack and I created Team, is we really embraced the idea of collaboration. And I think the more we can do that, you've obviously, said it could be to the credit of the seller and the buyer, but I think equally us as agents, if we start to collaborate more and we start to share ideas like we're doing on this call today and what have you, then there's a much greater opportunity for all of us to be in better spots. Your brokerage is, hails from the US, right? And the way they do things over there, in my humble opinion, is much better than the way we do it because of collaboration.
Yeah, and I think we do I lean into a lot of the Australian stuff because that's quite similar, I find. And I've actually got a school friend who works out on the Gold Coast. But yeah, I think the collaboration is really in agency specifically, but in any industry, because ultimately, I think what's the saying? If you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you're kind of not reaching out and meeting other agents and seeing what's going on elsewhere, then I think you're kind of probably standing still. So this week, even last week, not this week, this Monday, I had a chat to an agent I know in California. I've got another chat booked with someone else in Tennessee because I want to do certain things with my business. So who better to reach out to than people that have been there and done that, who are very generous with their time. So yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Success leaves clues and all that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love that. I love the collaboration piece. And you mentioned obviously the conversation you're having with people in California, Tennessee. You've obviously got a friend out on the Gold Coast, but you relocated from London to Manchester. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so it's Preston, which is near Manchester, but to be honest, everyone else in the country calls it Manchester because they don't know where Preston is. My wife's from Preston, so I met my wife in April 2006, and then once we got married in 2011, we decided to come back north because my family, although we lived in kind of Poplar, East London, my mum and dad are separated and they lived in 2 sort of different parts of Hertfordshire. So in terms of thinking about having children and support and all that kind of stuff, obviously London's such a big place, it wasn't really going to be useful or helpful. And where we live now, I'm in the Home Office today, and 500 yards that way is where mother and father-in-law live. So the kids are really present in their life and vice versa. So it's helped us in numerous ways. But that's why we're in Preston.
Love that.
How do you find the change from, I suppose, the busier London lifestyle to, I suppose it's a little bit maybe slower up north, people say? Is that the case?
Yeah, certainly initially it was a big culture shock. The last job I had in London was at Shad Thames, so Tower Bridge. So I went from doing viewings in kind of very, very busy central London, well, sub-central London really. And then one of the first viewings I did when I got to Preston was in North Preston in the countryside. And so there's fields and sheep and cows and all this kind of stuff. So it was, it was a big change to start with. It's something that I probably struggled with initially, but now with the children that we've got and everything else, it's a much, generally slower pace of life. But because it's a smaller place, you kind of got a bit of everything on your doorstep. So if we do want city, we've got Liverpool and Manchester. Preston's a kind of city also. If you want countryside, we've got that within 10, 15 minutes. If you want beach, we've got that within 20 minutes. So it's quite a nice location. But certainly, it was a change. But the temperature was really a problem for me for a couple of years. But I love living here now. Yeah, it's definitely colder and wetter.
I went on a similar journey to you, Michael. So one of the questions that I wanted to pose to you, because I moved from down south, but a lot later than you. So 2018 was when I relocated. Same reasons I met Hayley and moved to Derbyshire. So I'm not quite as north as you. So it's probably a tad colder where you are than where I am. But yeah, all of the things that you've shared were all of the things that I had to come to terms with. I worked in London for quite a long period of my career. So then moving from there to quite a rural part of Derbyshire. Like, wow, this is quite the culture shock. People saying hello to you that you don't know. I mean, who'd have thought that happens outside of London? But one of the big things that I recognised, and I'm interested to see whether you felt the same, the speed and the pace and how dynamic you need to be as an agent in London and let's say the South, and then you compare that to bringing that mentality to the North. Did you find that you had a bit of a competitive advantage?
Yeah, definitely. I think to be, should I say? Yeah, I will say. Well, I was interviewed for a big corporate in the UK, and they, brought me out from London a couple of times and got on the train and did the interviews and all that stuff. Didn't get the position, but I mean, that part's irrelevant. But I didn't get the job with them because of having come from London, and I think one of their big concerns, which obviously you couldn't get away with saying this now, and rightly so, was my accent. Being that I was such I would stick out like a sore thumb, so to speak, in that respect. But I think that, and what you've just said, generally having worked in those environments where, when was this? This was first quarter or second quarter 2008. I can't remember exactly. I worked in a branch. There were 3 negotiators. And at the time, obviously, the market had gone to absolute... the words I'm not going to use. Gone terrible, shall we say. And the director called all 3 negs in one at a time and said, at the end of the day, there's going to be 1 neg left. Why should it be you? Which was pretty savage. But I then obviously was the person that survived, thankfully. And I used that to build a platform for myself from there. And then we rebuilt the office and everything else that came along with that. But that kind of environment, I've never, and again, the times haven't been as bad as that since, but competitive wise, yeah, I think it's definitely helped me massively. Definitely.
Yeah. A definite advantage. It's interesting you say that about the whole accent piece. Initially, when I first moved, I thought, again, very Southern in the way I speak. My dialect hasn't changed a jot since I've moved, apart from embracing some of the local lingo, like who calls a roll a cob, right? But that's the thing here. In your neck of the woods, it's a barm cake, right?
Barm cake, yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought that it would be, and this was one of my own limiting beliefs, is that I thought being Southern, I don't fit in. I'm going to stand out like a sore thumb. But actually, when I started to get to a place where I really embraced it and kind of shared my background from the South and the journey I'd been on, and then the advantage that then gives the client I'm working with, people are like, okay, I really like the fact that you've got that approach. It's different. It's unique. And so I guess that leads into one of my questions I had from your intro. Award-winning, top 5% of agents. How did that come about? Like, what was the journey to lead to you becoming award-winning and becoming a top 5 agent?
Just graft, honestly. Well, very basic principles. Whenever I've tried to scale the business or improve, or if I go try and get overcomplicated with it doesn't really work out. So just basic, simple stuff, like obviously customer service. What does that look like? Well, it means, frequent communication with people, using the tools that we've got, WhatsApp, etc. Having tough conversations when they need to be had. So finding the right people, something that I've certainly got, I think, better at in the last 18 months to 2 years than I have ever been, is more thinking about myself in a leadership role as opposed to a management role, and trying to bring people along with me rather than manage them to a position kind of thing. But yeah, we've probably been, I reckon, since the second quarter of 2020 in the top two or three producing agents in the brokerage. So I think we just went for it, and application and worked really, really hard and did what was needed for the client. And then the business growth has come off the back of that. And that's always the principle. I think as long as we're doing the right thing for the client, then the business growth and everything else comes off the back of that. And where I've seen bigger agencies or more corporate agencies not quite do that so well is they go profit and what they're trying to do first and client second. And that doesn't really sit well with me.
Yeah. Profit over the people rather than the other way around.
Exactly.
Michael, I just want to take it back a step because you've built a very successful estate agency business over the past few years. What made you make the jump? Was it 2019 you made the jump into self-employed estate agency? And what was the reason for that pivot? And yeah, what was your thought process at the time?
I've been thinking about it for a long time. I basically, I'd found myself with a really good package for the Northwest, being a kind of strong negotiator, you might expect that. And that then, I then became a prisoner to that, if that makes sense. I kind of turned away from a lot of the self-development stuff I'm interested in. I turned away from a lot of the agency stuff. And then there was an event in Doncaster, which was Sanj Fest by Sanjay from Moss up in Doncaster. And I went there, and that was like a light bulb moment for me. Can't remember exactly when that was, but that was certainly the moment I remember seeing Tom Panos speak. And I was like, yeah, do you know what? I can do this. There is something better for me. And I'd always wanted to do it again. I started on my own in Canary Wharf in 2009-10, which looking back was a bit of a ludicrous decision because I'd had 2 years experience. I didn't really know enough to do what I needed to. Although perhaps it's not experience, but the competition was very fierce. I think there was 74 agents in that postcode at that time. And with a limited budget, it worked to a certain extent, but it wasn't perhaps the success we found here. But again, I find anything in life that's all part of the journey to where you're eventually going to get to, right? So yeah, that was the moment. I think that was the moment, and then it took me a number of years probably from there to decide which way to go. I was just about to sign with a particular brokerage, and then someone else told me about Keller. And then from there, that was it. And at the time, I'd had a bit of a dispute with my employer, and to be honest, the relationship broke down on both sides, and it was the right thing to do. It was a risk because at that time, 2019, we had 2 kids at that point, and it was a risk because they were, I think, certainly our middle son was still in nursery, but we just went for it.
I think it's a fascinating story because you made a change at a point when a lot of people would kind of look at the situation and go, is this really the right time? Young family. You could never have predicted several months later we'd have been locked down for half the year. But what was the thought process there? It's very clear to me from listening to the words you're using, there was no plan B. It was like, I'm going all in on this. But what was the thought process? I appreciate that you'd been to the event, you'd heard Tom Panos, there was this fire inside you, but how did you get your wife over the line?
Do you know what? My and I definitely probably don't say this enough in public. She's the basis on which it happened. Like, let's be honest about it. If you're in a committed relationship or married or and you've got children, you cannot do anything like this without having everyone on board. Like, you just can't. It's impossible. So she has always been someone to back me, which is why we managed to do it when we lived in Canary Wharf. And similarly here, when we're generally quite risk averse, but she really supported me because to make sure we didn't make any bad decisions, we actually took some money out on the house, took 6 months worth of salary out on a remortgage, just to make sure that we were not going to be comfortable, but we could pay the bills.
Yeah.
But she was all for it.
Brilliant. So far, what I'm gleaning from your shares, just to kind of encapsulate some of it, going all in, being consistent and relentless, getting those around you on board with the idea, part of the journey, supportive, creating a community around you that then kind of makes you, that 5 people, you become the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So there's a lot there. I think there's a lot of commonality in a lot of top performers. And forgive me for saying this, Michael, because from what I'm seeing from the outside looking in of your content and what you put out and the way you run your business, you are what we would classify as one of the elite, and hence why I wanted to get you on the pod. But at the same time, there's nothing out extraordinary from what you've shared that people can't replicate. And I mean that with greatest respect intended, because actually...
I love that you say that, because I say this at the Keller events all the time, and I think sometimes people think I'm just saying it. Like, I'm not a remarkable person. I don't consider myself to be perhaps the most intelligent, organized, reasonable, but it's not not a strength of mine. But what I am able to do, as I think you've pointed out, is get on with that consistency. This is very cheesy, but I'm going to say it. I heard the song "The Climb" over the weekend, and I've been looking at the lyrics and thinking about that. And one thing is, there's always going to be another mountain, right? That's my mindset. There's always going to be something that I'm not happy with, that I want to be better at or better. And I think that is a thread, as you've said, of all those top performers that I know. They're never, ever quite satisfied. There's always, they get to this goal and then they're like, right, what's next? And again, that's, for me personally, myself, that is a bit of a fault, because I then don't celebrate success particularly well, because I'm always on to the next thing. But I think you're right. And anyone could do it. Back to my point at the Keller events, I say, you can all do this. Any of you could do this and do what I've done. It's not rocket science. You just got to do the simple things right and do them consistently well.
You
live and breathe that, Jack. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's, I suppose, a lot of similarity. I think it's really interesting that you mention, I suppose, the next mountain to come up against, because it shows you've got a real growth mindset, and the personal development piece. I think it's huge when it comes to mindset, and being fully focused. And I think if you can get your mindset right, that's where you can see that success. But we talk about being boringly consistent all the time, and I'm quite similar. I think, doing the very simple stuff, but doing it repetitively, doing it as repeatedly and consistently, and you'll start to see the results. But I think some people won't do it because they'll try it for a short period of time. It hasn't worked, and then they'll question and get into their own head. But I think it's really important you've got that focused mindset, which you clearly have got, Michael. So yeah, very, very interesting. So with one of the questions I had with your current business, is there a particular type of client that you're looking to work with? Do you have an ideal client, and what's your business structure kind of look like?
So do we have an idea? It kind of changes it to a certain degree. So we're not really a niched agency. So we work from, I think the cheapest unit we've probably sold, and to anyone down south, they'll probably laugh at this number, is 87 grand this last 12 months.
A deposit.
Yeah. And the most expensive is about $1,065,000, and then everything else in between. So me personally, if I was to be niched at, say, the mid to top end specifically, that can be quite not hard work, but you're not probably doing as many appointments and stuff like that as I might do. But I like to sort of keep that blade sharp, so I don't mind doing a bit of everything. But our main thing is really good people working with good clients that we feel we can make a really good relationship with. Someone who really does need our support and our help, and somewhere where we actually think we can make a difference, as opposed to just taking the listing. So they're the metrics that we look around the clients. The way that the team works now, so we've got like an admin assistant who puts all our particulars together and contracts and all of the pre-sale stuff. They then also put the properties on the market and everything else. Then I've got Ben, who works alongside me. So Ben is more like what I would say a sales agent. So he's not quite a negotiator. He's quite a bit more than that, but he's not quite self-employed agent either. So he's kind of in between both of them. Then we've got, following off the back of that, we've got our progression team. And then we've also got one self-employed agent who works in one of our peripheral locations. And then we're looking to recruit as many more of those people as we can. And I've just actually signed for another admin assistant who is going to be Ben's assistant. So rather than Ben spend lots of time booking in viewings, which obviously needs to be done, let someone else do that as a more full-time role so they can put more time into that. they can spend better time to get to know people, and we can start putting more deals together for our clients in terms of actually deal making, as opposed to just booking Susan in to go and view Acacia Avenue. And then that will free Ben up more to serve our clients better, and again, to hopefully sell more homes.
I like that. It's just the thought process around putting the right people in the right seats to make you more productive rather than busy.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've built a good infrastructure around you to give you the support you need to go out there and continue to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Michael, around the growth mindset. You achieve a goal and it's on to the next one. And I suppose you said there were no questions that were off the table. And as a dad of 2 children myself, how do you strike that balance between being a husband, being a dad, being a business owner? I have no doubt that there are endeavors and things that are of interest to you outside of those 3 areas, sport or hobbies or whatever else. So have you found the balance is the first question. Are you still in search of it? And if you have found it, how do you manage it?
My view is I think we're always in search of all of it. I think balance is hard to achieve, and I think that my view on myself is I'm either excelling in one area and I'm probably then neglecting another. So I'm trying to be more mindful and get more self-awareness around that, to ensure that I'm not neglecting one area in view of another, and trying to balance it out a bit more. But I don't think generally you're ever going to get full balance. But as long as you're mindful that that's the case, then sometimes tweaks need to be made and such like. So it's difficult, but I do certain things. So for example, what's today, Monday? So I take the 2 older boys to football training tonight. One of them tomorrow has like a parkour class that he goes to, so I do that. Nice. Wednesday, what we do on Wednesday? Nothing on Wednesday. Nothing on Thursday. Friday, we take them to their swimming lessons, and up until recently, cricket is finished for the season now. I don't work weekends anymore, although I've definitely earned the right to that because I've done it for nearly 20 years. And I've just tried to be more mindful around that kind of time. So I put time into the business, time into the family, but equally I work around the family in terms of if something needs to get done, then perhaps I'll do it of an evening. I generally have not recently, because I've been on holiday, not got back into it, but in terms of exercise, I've been doing exercise in the morning before everyone gets up. And then play football twice a week. But I'm just a million miles an hour, as many of us are. No time for rest in the middle of all of that. And it sounds to me from the way you've explained it, it's almost like you go through. So rather than having a balance day to day, it's more seasons. So you'll go through a season, and then at the end of that season, there'll be a break with your family, and you have that time at the weekend where you can kind of be all in committed to being in that environment. And so it sounds like you've kind of found it, but in an alternate way. Yeah, probably that's the best way to look. So, for example, we've gone. We've got 6 weeks holiday in the summer. We've been away for 2 weeks. We've got a wedding with one of our colleagues on Friday. So we're then doing 5 weeks in Oxford. 5 days, sorry, not 5 weeks. So they're trying to establish that balance there, as opposed to perhaps day to day is not as easy as over a week or a month or something like that.
Spread over a period.
But I drop the kids at school every day, so I'm very blessed to be able to do that. Very, very lucky to be able to do that. I know my own parents didn't manage to drop us at school every day because we had childcare and stuff because they're both working. So I've just tried to look at things that, what were they like in my life as a child, and then what can I do to make that better or different for our sons.
And has that got easier as well? I suppose the more the business has grown and the more infrastructure you've been able to put into the business, has that allowed you to have, I suppose, more time with the family and maybe a better balance? I don't think anyone can say there's a perfect balance, but a better balance.
Certainly, around the weekends. But again, one of my personal values around leaving my job was I can only do this if it works better for everyone on all levels. So I've always dropped the kids at school. Actually, my previous employer, although, as I said, our relationship broke down, were quite good about that. And then I've always taken the kids to classes. The only change I think really between now and then is, and again, this might be something I change, it's been on my mind quite recently, is between both my oldest son and my middle son, I didn't work Wednesdays. So I used to have them at home with me on a Wednesday, which is something that I never was, my family were never lucky enough to do for me. And my youngest son is getting a bit older now. So I am thinking perhaps I might stop working Wednesdays, or just work 2 hours when he napped in the afternoon or something like that. But yeah, we try to do as best as I can everywhere. But listen, we're all flawed, right? And I think as long as you know that, that's the best bit about it.
It's the self-awareness is the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, James, I'm sure you can relate a lot being a dad of 2 as well.
Yeah, totally. I was going to ask, what's the ages for you? You've got 3 boys, right?
Yes, we've got Albert, who's known as Bertie, who's 18 months, and then we've got Finley, who's 7, and Henry, who's 10.
So quite a gap between second and third.
Yeah, we're pretty full on it.
Yeah, going through the sleepless nights and all that sort of shenanigans again. I feel for you.
Do you know what? That was my biggest concern, actually, and it hasn't been half as bad that as I thought it would be. It's I think probably because the other 2 are a little bit closer. Yeah, that might have made that more challenging. Whereas because they're much older, and actually they're good kids. They're very helpful and everything else with their brother. So nothing's easy in life, but it's definitely been a lot easier than I thought it would be. But yeah, very, very, very blessed and very lucky. I was watching them playing in the garden yesterday, all 3 of them together. And that's probably not something necessarily that I've brilliant at practicing that gratitude of, you know what? Yeah, I'm very, very lucky indeed in lots of ways.
I really respect that. As I say, this is the first time we've spoken. Obviously, we've communicated through LinkedIn and bits and pieces, but first time we've properly spoken. And listening to you, you're clearly a very thoughtful person. You're clearly developing a real strong self-awareness, and there's that acceptance that nothing is perfect, but the journey is the bit that's important, and how you're going on that journey. And I think some people really struggle with that. I think they really struggle with this self-awareness, that humility to reflect inward and go, is this really what I want? It's almost like head down, heading for the finish line, but what is the finish line? And it sounds to me like you've got this real kind of balance. I keep using the word balance, but this real balanced approach to life, business, family. And I really rate that. It really comes across in the way you deliver what you're saying. It's very thoughtful and considered. Going to a slightly more fun edge, back in July, I saw across your Facebook and LinkedIn what I thought was just brilliant. It made me chuckle every time I saw these posts pop up, and it was all to do with an election campaign and a campaign for change and for homeowners to see that there's a new way to do business. What inspired that, and what came of it?
To be honest, as another person on our team, really, who I should have mentioned, is we work with a PR company on retainer. So it was their brilliant idea, and Lee rang me one day and said, "Right, I've got this." He always kind of does these things that I'm probably a little bit too kind of stiff to come up with those ideas, perhaps on my own, but. He rang me and said, "Listen, it's going to be brilliant." So I was like, "Well, yeah, okay, let's do it." And it was his idea, but then off the back of that, we've tagged that into various Facebook advert campaigns, tagged it into our direct mail stuff. But yeah, it was Lee's idea, but I thought it was a brilliant one. Just what he would term newsjacking around the time of the election, and trying to just use something that was in the public eye to get attention. That video.
Outside number 10.
Outside number 10, yeah. The last time I checked, which was a little while ago now, I think that had 70,000 organic views, and for me, that's like huge. So, yes. But yeah, I just like doing something different, a bit funny, a bit jovial. We've done a few bits like that with Lee. We did one that was measuring value of a property in tubs of Lurpak when that was in the press about how expensive butter had got, and again, that went kind of semi-viral. So. Yeah, it was Lee's idea, but yeah, I enjoyed it. Again, Lee and I are both quite politically aware and politically engaged, so it was something that we're both interested in, which tied into the business. So yeah, it was a great idea.
And off the back of it, because obviously it was fun. And as you say, that newsjacking approach probably got a good amount of attention, positive, I would imagine, on the main. Has there been any direct impact from it? Have you had people reach out? Because it showed a lot of personality. It was, yeah. Have you had like a lot of clients that have been engaged with it and gone, I really like the fact that you're different?
Yeah, I've had quite a few people that have seen it, but certainly I can think of one recent listing that came off the back of it directly from someone that I'd lost touch with, who I'd done a lot of work with previously at the other agency I worked for, and they the lady rang me and said, I've seen that video. I felt like you were talking to me. I was like, all right, okay. And then it's gone on from there. So yeah, it's been good. It's definitely been good.
Brilliant.
I suppose it's the exposure that it gets for you as well in the brand and the business. And for those that are listening, as I said earlier, we only connected quite recently, but I see a lot of your content now across multiple different platforms. What sort of platforms do you use in terms of social media, and how impactful do you think social media has been for your business?
So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We do little bits on TikTok, but again, it's something we need to spend more time on, because I think that's a really growth platform there, where the algorithms aren't quite as directed yet towards advertising as the others. But yeah, social's been one of our pillars from the start. I think when we started the business, there were kind of 3 pillars really, which was get out on socials. I'm a ethical person. I don't like to. I'll give you an example. Where I worked in London, these 2 guys ran this letting agency, and they went off abroad and left someone in charge. And then what happened was said person ripped off their database and then started causing all sort of problems and set their own business up off the back of that. Now, that's something which sits very uncomfortably with me, and I didn't want to do that. So what I thought about instead was, okay, well, I've helped these customers previously. What is another way I could get myself out there in the public eye, which could bring clients back to me, which isn't doing something which is unethical, which is why we chose social as one of our big pillars and platforms, because it was a way of getting in front of people. And off the back of that, we've had many clients approach us who I've helped over the years. And I thought, I called the company after myself. I am the brand, so to speak. So it was the best way to do it. So social has been massive for us, definitely. Networking as well, found that to be very, very useful. And also building a big database. We've got a huge database, because one very, very simple, boring thing that we do is we add 25 people to our database every single week, which we've done since I started. And that obviously in Preston, with the population as it is, means that we've got like a healthy database to be talking to people about property. But yeah, socials is massive. I think we can see there's plenty of agents that have literally just focused on that as their lead gen strategy, and they're doing great things. So yeah, I think it's massive.
100% agree. And you talked about the 3 pillars. So you've talked about socials there, networking. What's the 3rd pillar?
Yeah, that was more direct, low hanging fruit targeting. So whether that would be direct mail or door knocking, or just generally looking for business where we could help, and not in a, door knocking, I think for some people gets a bad rap. I'm not knocking, and I haven't knocked doors and said your agent is X, Y, or Z. I've knocked and seen how can I be helpful to you as a person. And my newest recruit is following that same sort of mantra, and they're seeing great results from it. And I think when you first start out, that kind of thing is something that's really, really important to do. You've got people that have got their hands in the air via an advert or a sign that may need assistance, and as long as it's done in the right way and you're not there to slate the competition, which is it's just not the right thing to do, then I think go for it. It's fair game, isn't it? If we're looking after our clients, then they're not going to get poached, and if we're not, then I think we should all be mindful that there's someone going to be coming up after us that wants that business, and fair play to everyone for those endeavours, I think.
Totally. Couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more.
I'm a big believer in door knocking, and I know it gets a lot of a lot of conversations going, especially on LinkedIn, some for door knocking, others totally against door knocking. But I think if you're an agent and you feel you can make a difference to a client that's on the market, then you've got a duty of care to go and inform them and tell them that there is another way. Because I think most agents want to be the biggest agent in the area. And that means a lot of their clients, the ones that aren't selling very quickly, get forgotten about and get left. And I think it's our duty to go out and let those sellers know that we can help and we can make a difference.
I think it's the whole zigging when others are zagging as well, right? You know, if door knocking and direct mail even, you know, that gets some bad press now. People are like direct mail is dead. And so I think the only medium of delivery that people totally agree on almost unanimously, I think, is social media at the minute. But if everyone is there, it means that you can zig, go and door knock, because others that are zagging won't do it. If people are claiming that direct mail is dead, do direct mail, because guess what? There are fewer and fewer people receiving boost now. So actually, you've got more of a captive audience than you had maybe 10, 15 years ago. And so I really, really rate the way that you've delivered it, in so much as it is low-hanging fruit, but these people have essentially got their hand in the air saying, I need help. My house has been on the market for more than 8 weeks. I need help. Come and talk to me.
We had a guy come over from Canada in the US who did a talk, and he couldn't believe that like you were allowed to do that. And his view was, I'm not being funny. If I was to come over tomorrow and start a business, I'll crush all you guys. Yeah. And the other thing as well, finding your groove and what works for you. What fits for me isn't going to fit for someone else. And if you're doing something you really, really hate doing,
don't do it.
You got. And again, it's another cheesy thing. I'm obviously cheesy, but you've got to enjoy this journey. You've got to get into the journey, because it's what I found is when you get to the destination of the goal, that's not always the thing that brings the joy. It's the doing work along the way. So if you're doing something that you don't like doing, well, fine, switch out to find. In fact, I posted a video on my stories this morning of Jimmy Carr and Stephen Bartlett, that the first podcast they did, which is phenomenal. And he was saying, if you're crap at physics but you're brilliant at English, don't become a physicist. Spend your time doing English. And he was, again, put your time into your strengths.
It's so true, isn't it?
Thing you're better at than not better at than other people even. Just focus on your thing.
Yeah, it's like trying to ask a fish to climb a tree. It's a pointless exercise.
Yeah.
True though, right? It's the age-old thing, you know, focus on what you're really, really, really good at and just go all in on it. We've got agents within our network that, you know, they don't like the concept or the principle behind door knocking. Fine. But what they are really good at is other mediums of generating opportunity. So they just go all in on them. I really rate that. You've shared so much gold with us. We've kept you on the call for slightly longer than we first suggested, so apologies for that. But I've got one closing question for you, Michael, and I think a lot of people that are listening in will get great value from what you've shared. But if you were to sit down, and undoubtedly you do within your brokerage, sit down with someone who's either new into the world of self-employed estate agency or wanting to go on the journey, what's the one piece, and you can't share something you've already shared, what's the one piece of advice on top of what you've already shared that you'd say, if you do this, or you think like this, or you follow this pathway, then you can't guarantee success, but you'll be on the right journey?
I would probably say, from all of the elite people that I speak to, if you're on this journey and you get to that point where you're just about to chuck the towel in, my view would be that's the point at which you need to go all in once again, because just the other side of that is the success.
Love that. I love that. I love what you've done there as well, by the way. You shared earlier on that being consistent and following a process. And what you've done is you've essentially rehashed that in a slightly different way. And I really rate that. But there is no magic formula, is there? You know, but what you've taken is at your core, just keep doing the thing and the thing will come good.
Yeah. It reminds me of that. Have you seen the photo where there's a guy mining for gold and he stops just before it, and he could have just gone that little bit further, and the gold was right there. So I think that's a great piece of advice.
Sorry, before we close off, I have got one final question. I know the last one was supposed to be the final one, but I need to ask you this one as well. How long should someone that's at the beginning of their journey how long should they expect before they start to see the fruits of their labour? How long do they have to commit, in your view?
9 months, really. You will see some bits dropping in at 6 months, definitely, but to actually see where you're going to get to, I think is 9 months.
So take that relentless attitude that you've talked about, that daily rhythm of repeated behaviours, and repeat them day after day after day, and become really boring for 9 months. And at the end of that period, they'll start to see the organic fruits of their labour.
Yeah, and get the support around you to help you do that. So, and again, as I'm very direct, so I'll tell you the whole team really in that sense. I've got a coach, I've got a mentor. I've seen a therapist for a long time. I see the therapist once a week around various sort of things, but certainly that's where that developed self-awareness has come from me, because you need the support of all these people to keep you on that track, because there's going to be times where you're going to try and deviate off, or you wake up and you've deviated off, and you need someone to help bring you back in to whatever that midline is.
Absolutely. I love that. And by the way, I really, really rate that you shared openly those pieces, because I think that's one thing we haven't touched on. I feel like there's an extension of this podcast that could continue to go down that pathway. But I totally agree with you. Having those 5 people around you, you become the sum, but equally it's a bit like a professional sports person, isn't it? Cristiano Ronaldo, for his entire career, was one of the best footballers on the planet, but he still had coaches, nutritionists, a sleep expert. On a different podcast, I've had his sleep expert come on and talk to us. All of these different people that were his coach. You can't perform at an elite level without having that support network around you. And so that just is indicative of your growth mindset and your elite level of agency. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. There's so much value.
Just for the listeners and anyone that's been listening in, if you'd like to hear or see more of Michael's stuff, Michael, where can they find you across the social media platforms?
So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and all of those are at Michael Bailey Estate Agent. It's not, again, keeping it simple.
Yeah, make yourself easy to find. Michael, It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad that we've connected this way. It's been really great having you on the podcast, hearing your journey, hearing your story, and I'm sure it won't end there. I'd love to find ways to collaborate with you in the future. So thank you.
Brilliant. Likewise. Thanks, chaps.
Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye now.